During a speech at the Select Forum, Chinese President Xi Jinping declared his support for Latin American and Caribbean countries to reject external interference. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh on Tuesday on his first international tour of the Middle East since taking office. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights expressed on Tuesday the entity's concern about the deportation of Venezuelan migrants illegally incarcerated in the top security second prison in El Salvador. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In China, during a speech at the Select Forum, President Xi Jinping declared his support for Latin American and Caribbean countries to reject external interference and follow a development path in accordance with their national conditions. During his inaugural speech at the fourth edition of the China Select Ministerial Forum, the Chinese president said that the countries of the region stand united against geopolitical tensions, confrontations, unilateralism, and protectionism. On the other hand, he rejected bullying and high-handed practices a day after Beijing and Washington announced a truce that will see tariffs cut by 10% and 30%. President Xi also said that China and CELAC will implement the Global Development Initiative to defend the multilateral trading system and strengthen industrial chains.
Faced with the undercurrents of geopolitical and bloc confrontation, the rise of unilateralism and protectionism, China is willing to join hands with Latin America to launch 5 major initiatives for shared development and revitalization, and to build a China-Latin America community with a shared future.
In this context, the Chinese president praised China's CELAC ties over the past decade and announced credits worth $9.2 billion for development projects in Latin America.
I feel extremely gratified that in the last 10 years, thanks to the meticulous cultivation of both sides, the China CELAC Forum has grown from a tender shoot into a great sturdy tree. Although China lies a far distance from Latin America and the Caribbean region, the two sides have a time-honored history of friendly exchanges. In order to support the development of Latin American and Caribbean countries, China will provide 66 billion renminbi in credit to the Latin American side.
For its part, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi criticized the United States for pushing unilateral hegemony and using tariffs to bully other countries.
Today's world, the trend of a multipolar world, and economic globalization is surging forward, but a certain major power is obsessed with the idea that might makes right and puts itself above everyone else. It is trying to replace international rules with the law of the jungle, and replace the multilateral system with unilateral hegemony. It is also using tariffs as a weapon to bully other countries. Such actions have violated the legitimate rights and interests of the entire world, including China and Latin American countries, undermined the multilateral trading system based on rules, and disrupted the stability of the global political and economic order.
In a statement during her 3-day trip to Japan, the Director General of World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, referred to the current global trade status.
Trade is facing very challenging times right now, and it's quite difficult. But I also feel that there are many important opportunities in trade that we need to look forward to, and we should try to use this crisis as an opportunity to solve the challenges we have and take advantage of the new trends in trade.
In Russia, at least 6 civilians were killed and 17 others were wounded after attacks by the Ukrainian army in the middle of the 72-hour truce declared by Moscow. The special envoy of the Russian Foreign Ministry for the crimes of the Kyiv regime, Rodion Miroshnik, denounced that the attacks caused damage to residential buildings, medical transport, civilian vehicles and business premises. Miroshnik added that these aggressions made with heavy weapons were registered in the border province of Kursk. On the other hand, in the locality of Svanoe, a man was killed by a rocket launcher attack, while in Glushkovo, a woman was killed by an aviation bomb. British police on Monday were investigating an overnight fire at the London house where Prime Minister Keir Starmer lived before he was elected to lead the country. Since taking office in July, Starmer has lived in the Prime Minister's official Downing Street residence, renting out the family home in the Kentish Town neighbourhood. London's Metropolitan Police Force said that counter-terrorism officers were involved in the investigation. The city's fire department said that firefighters were called to a small fire just after 1 a.m. local time. According to the police force, the fire is being investigated and cordons remain in place while inquiries continue. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh on Tuesday on his first international tour of the Middle East since taking office. The tour will last 4 days and will also take him to Qatar and to the Arab Emirates. During his stay in the Arab Kingdom, U.S. President Trump is scheduled to inaugurate a U.S.-Saudi investment forum and will be received by the highest authorities of the Saudi royal family. President Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia will focus on investment and trade deals, but it comes at a critical time for the region, with Washington's attempts to renew the nuclear talk with Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the United States has imposed new sanctions on Iran after another round of nuclear talks. Rubio explained that the actions are part of President Donald Trump's call for maximum pressure against Iran's proliferation activities and to ensure that Tehran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. The new sanctions were imposed a day after the fourth round of indirect talks on Tehran's nuclear program were held in Oman. For his part, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said that the negotiations are a sign of commitment to peace and the search for an agreement, but made it clear that Tehran is not willing to abandon its nuclear facilities as demanded by the counterpart. In Palestine, at least 3 people were killed and 10 injured after a new Israeli attack hit the largest hospital in southern Gaza. Health authorities reported that the bombing early Tuesday morning hit the surgery department of Nasser Hospital, located in the city of Khan Yunis. The Wafa news agency reported that the attack killed journalist Hassan Asli, who was receiving treatment for injuries sustained in an earlier bombing. His death brings to 213 the number of media workers killed by Israel in Gaza since October 2023. Occupation army attacks claimed at least 11 lives since early this morning. Israeli Edan Alexander, who was released on Monday by the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement Hamas, has declined a personal meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Due to his refusal to meet with the Prime Minister, the Israel Broadcasting Corporation said that political controversy has been generated within the regime. Although the reasons for his refusal are not yet known, information sources indicate that the causes may be related to dissatisfaction with the performance of the Israeli government while he was held hostage. It should be noted that Alexander is the first person to be released since the 8-week ceasefire with Hamas, when violent attacks on the Gaza Strip took the lives of thousands of people. In Syria, the education system faces a huge challenge due to the deterioration and destruction as a result of the war, thus preventing the reconstruction and adequate staffing. Several educational institutions were razed to the ground by the war and have not yet been recovered. Some that have obtained the support of international entities for restoration face a shortage of experts. The closure of numerous schools has forced students to flock to the few schools that are still functioning, causing them to be beyond capacity due to a shortage of teachers. The government is undertaking more reconstruction efforts in deteriorated schools, and the United Nations Children's Fund reports that over 7.5 million children in Syria need humanitarian assistance. In Libya, at least 7 people were killed after heavy clashes between armed groups in the capital, Tripoli. According to a statement from the Libyan Center for Emergency Medicine and Support, the bodies, whose identities are still unknown, were found by the Body Recovery Unit in the streets near the epicenter of the conflict. The clashes between the Stability Support Apparatus and a coalition of the joint force in Misrata followed the assassination of the head of the support apparatus, Abdul Ghani al-Kigli, known as Ginua. In this regard, the Ministry of Interior has called on all citizens not to leave their homes, and the city's educational institutions have suspended all academic activities indefinitely. The governments of India and Pakistan announced the cessation of mutual military operations as of this Monday, May 12. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the first to announce the suspension of his operations against military infrastructure in Pakistan, while stressing that it would continue to closely monitor the actions of his neighbor and act accordingly. Modi, for his part, stressed that any terrorist attack against India would be met with an appropriate response. Following this announcement, Pakistan announced that the end of its military operation launched on May 10th last year ends in response to Indian military activities in Pakistani territory. Relations between India and Pakistan remain tense after the April 22nd attack in Pahalgam in Indian-administered territory that left 21 Indian and 1 Nepali dead. After a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan, most educational institutions in Kashmir reopened on Tuesday. The authorities decided to reopen schools after assessing the security situation, especially in areas close to the line of control and international border. However, schools in areas such as Kupwara, Baramulla and Gurez sub-district remain closed as these are still under supervision. The truce concluded 4 days of missile, drone and artillery attacks that resulted in dozens of deaths in both countries and represented their most devastating conflict since 1999. And we have a second salt break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final show break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, expressed Tuesday the entity's concern about the deportation of non-nationals, in particular the cases of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants illegally incarcerated in the top security second prison in El Salvador. The United Nations Rights Chief detailed that since U.S. President Trump took office in January, 1,042 142,000 immigrants have been deported from that nation. In this regard, the diplomat was worried about a wide array of rights that have been violated, which are fundamental to both U.S. and international law. Turk further denounced that the fate and whereabouts of some 245 Venezuelans and 30 Salvadorans removed to El Salvador remain unknown. Likewise, he claimed that the detainees' families granted that the migrants were taken to the second prison without being notified.
The deportation over recent months of large numbers of non-nationals from the United States of America, especially to countries other than those of their origin, raises a number of human rights concerns. The UN Human Rights Office has information from family members and lawyers regarding more than 100 Venezuelans believed to be held in SECOT. These reports indicate that many of the detainees were not informed of the US government's intention to deport them to be held in a third country, that many did not have access to a lawyer, and that they were effectively unable to challenge the lawfulness of their removal before being flown out of the US. This situation raises serious concerns regarding a wide array of rights that are fundamental to both US and international law. Rights to due process, to be protected from arbitrary detention, to equality before the law, to be protected from exposure to torture or other irreparable harm in other states, and to an effective remedy.
Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government denounces the omissive and biased attitude of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, in the face of violations against Venezuelans abroad. In a communique, the Venezuelan government pointed out that her recent lukewarm statement demonstrates an unacceptable double standard. While she vehemently attacks Venezuela, she remains silent in the face of abuses committed by governments aligned with hegemonic interests. She seems more concerned with preserving her office than with defending human rights. The document also states that the position of High Commissioner requires firmness, not ambiguity. Her inaction in the face of these crimes reflects a negligent and complacent attitude towards the systematic violation of the human rights of Venezuelans. Venezuela will continue to demand justice and denounce the political use of our migrants as a hostage in the war against our people. Panama celebrates 21 days of an indefinite national strike initiated by teachers in rejection of Law 462 and denounces the arrest of union leaders. The single union of construction and similar industry workers also repudiated the government's intention to reopen a copper mine in the province of Colón and rejected the construction of a dam in Rio Indio for the canal against the will of the inhabitants of the region. Previously, the Ministry of Education of Panama announced the withholding of salaries to teachers who demand the repeal of the law, which affects workers and their families with the privatization of the services of the Social Security Fund. The government of Colombia has received intelligence reports about a possible attempt on President Gustavo Petro's life. According to the Minister of the Interior, Armando Benedetti, intelligence information has been coming in, especially in the last week, about an attack. Benedetti also explained that there are some people who have been meeting and would like to strike a blow against the president. Last week, President Petro accused U.S. Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart of coordinating meetings with politicians in Colombia with the purpose of overthrowing him through maneuvers in Congress. Similarly, he took aim at Álvaro Leiva, who was his foreign minister between 2022 and 2024, and with whom he now has a dispute. A Brazilian defense website denounced U.S. President Donald Trump's new expansionist threat to obtain the usufruct of a strategic portion of Brazil, the island of Fernando de Noronha. The news broke last week on a defense news website that described the idea as an unrestricted initiative based on an alleged historical right to the investment made by the United States during the Second World War at its airport. In this way, the United States continues with its more explicit or veiled strategy of externalizing which sovereign territories it wants to appropriate. So far this year, President Trump has also shown interest in the territories of Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. The Latin American Contemporary Film Festival 2025 will be held in Costa Rica from May 14th to 30th. This is a free event developed jointly by the embassies of Cuba, Chile, Argentina, Honduras, Bolivia, Panama, Nicaragua, Peru, Brazil, and Colombia in the Central American nation, with the objective of recovering spaces for cultural diffusion in the region through the seventh art. Among the productions that will be present at the festival are a place called Dignity from Chile, the feature film Queens from Peru, and The Owner of the Story from Brazil. In addition to the screenings, there will also be spaces for talks, discussions, exhibitions of handicraft, and typical food from some of the countries attending the event. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.